Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give it just a few more minutes, let people trickle in, and then we'll get started. Awesome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. In this session, we'll be presenting our topic on how you can leverage Zoom Rivet for JavaScript to fast track your Zoom API and webhook development. I'm Will Ezrine, and I'm joined by my colleague James Kuhn, and we are developer advocate engineers at Zoom. More importantly, we are the developers behind Zoom Rivet, and we are very excited to show you what we've built. James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Development plan. Hey there. As Will mentioned, I'm a developer advocate engineer or a developer migration specialist here at Zoom, on the same team as well, developing Zoom Rivet. So I'll pass it back over.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So before we get started, we must show you our safe harbor statement, which outlines that any forward-looking material is preliminary and subject to change. I'll give you a few moments to read over this, and then we can get started. Awesome. So here's our agenda for today. We'll be talking about what it's like to interface without Zoom Rivet, and then we'll be taking a deep dive into what Zoom Rivet is, how you can get started, and some of its advanced concepts. Finally, we'll show you Rivet in live action and answer any questions. So let's get started. Before we jump into what Zoom Rivet is and how it can be leveraged to fast track your development on Zoom's platform, we must take a look at what it's like to build integrations with Zoom the old-fashioned way without any specialized tools. Whether you're programmatically saving meetings recordings to an external storage provider, building a phone dashboard, or maybe even creating a Zoom team chatbot, you will quickly run into the same pattern. You need to interface directly with Zoom's APIs and events. That means digging through documentation, handling OAuth flows, parsing webhook payloads, and building out a lot of boilerplate just to get the basics working. It's doable, but it's repetitive, error-prone, and often a huge time sink, especially when you're trying to move fast. Before we take a look at what it's like to build with Zoom Rivet, James will walk us through a short demo of what an integration built the old-fashioned way looks like, just to highlight some of the pain points developers run into.
Before we talk about how to build with Rivet, let's start talking about how to build without Rivet, using Node.js in a basic TypeScript application that I've created. This was bootstrapped using TypeScript's TSC init command, with some of the only additions being quality of life plugins like Prettier. If we inspect our package.json file, we can see that for this part of the demo, outside of some TypeScript development dependencies, we only have Express.js installed as well, which we will be using to spawn our HTTP server. To get started building on Zoom, we'll first go over to the marketplace via marketplace.zoom.us. But before we do that, since we are developing locally, we'll want to spawn an ngrok tunnel via our terminal and copy that link. Now, I've already done that in the background, and that link has been copied to my clipboard. So we'll go to the Zoom marketplace. On the Zoom marketplace, we'll want to go to Develop and Build App and select a general app. Once you've created a general app, this page will appear, as you can see on the screen. We'll paste our ngrok URL into the OAuth information page or field. Now we'll go over to Surfaces. We'll select Team Chat and go down to Team Chat subscriptions. We'll want to specify a / command. For this example, we'll do Dev Summit 2025. And for our bot endpoint, we'll do our ngrok URL /zoom/events, as this is the URL that our Express.js server and later Rivet will expect. And we'll grab our client ID and secret from our app credentials. We'll grab the secret token for our webhook validation. And then over on surfaces, we'll grab that bot JID from our Teams chat subscription. Now flipping back over to VS Code, we're going to open up a TypeScript file. We'll call this without Rivet for now. As you've probably already noticed, we have some information already pre-filled, mainly a lot of Bootstrap code for Express.js, where we're going to be validating our webhook, fetching a chatbot token, and then sending a chatbot message. So first, we will validate our incoming webhook. In order to do this, we can reference our documentation over at developers.zoom.us, specifically on this page for verifying webhook events. This will mean that we need to receive the webhook request, construct our message, hash it, create a signature, and then compare that the hash that we created equals the same hash that we received from Zoom. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we need to fetch a valid chatbot token. In order to do that, we can reference our chatbot API documentation, specifically on send a chatbot message. Since this uses a different authorization flow, client credentials flow, some of the information that you need is in this page. So we'll flip back over to VS Code and we'll create some code that will fetch a chatbot token using the chatbot client ID and client secret that we fetched earlier, that is inside of our environment variables, calling Zoom's API for client credentials, and then responding with the access token. And then finally, that same page that we were on has some information about how to send a chatbot message, mainly which fields are required, such as robot JID, to JID, account ID, content, etc. So we'll send our chatbot message over here. And this will call our send a chatbot message API, which is a post request. We'll use that previously fetched access token in our authorization bearer header. We'll say that it is a application JSON content type, and then we'll stringify that JSON payload that Zoom is expecting. The most notable one here is the content block. This is what will be actually shown to your user. So with all of that done, we'll go over to our terminal and we'll go ahead and start the server. And now with this running, we'll head on over to our Zoom client. We'll open up our chatbot and then we'll send a / command. Awesome. Now that you can see that we have received our / command, you may have noticed that we went through a lot of steps to get this project up and running and an API request sent to Zoom. So we'll flip it back over to Will to talk more about how we can make this process more streamlined using Zoom Rivet.
Awesome. Thanks, James, for that demo. So now that you know what it's like to build integrations without Zoom Rivet, let's show you all about our tool. So what is Rivet? Zoom Rivet is a server-side framework that is built to accelerate development on Zoom's wide developer platform. Currently, Rivet is built in JavaScript and TypeScript, but will be available in Python and Java environments in the future. What are Zoom Rivet's capabilities? There are three main capabilities of Zoom Rivet, and they are its effortless authorization, its API wrappers, and event subscription listeners. When you're working with Zoom Rivet, you simply need to provide the credentials of your app and start your server. No need for fetching tokens or refreshing them. You can get started building your core business logic on day one. Once you start building, you can immediately tap into our API wrappers and event subscriptions. That means that any endpoint or event that we list on our API documentation is supported if the module is supported within Zoom Rivet. That takes us to our modules that we support. Currently, Zoom Rivet for JavaScript supports the modules you see on your screen. However, we are constantly adding more throughout the year and plan on supporting all of Zoom's many APIs and events. So now that we've seen the basics of Zoom Rivet, let's think back on what it's like to develop with the alternative. You have to interface directly with the APIs and events, meaning that setting up the code infrastructure to do so. It means that you have to set up the authorization and authentication flows, which is more code infrastructure as well. It means no built-in receiver or webhook management. And finally, slower development cycles with no built-in error handling. So now let's take a look at what some basic code to see what it's like to get started with Zoom Rivet for JavaScript. Getting started with Rivet. Oh, not ready for that one. Sorry. Getting started with Rivet is quite simple. Here you can see in these snippets, you can simply install Rivet via npm, set up a very basic boilerplate, provide your credentials, and start your server. When working with events, developers can easily use the event method on the web event consumer to tap into any webhook we support. From there, you can provide the event key and your own custom logic to invoke once the event payload is returned. Additionally, you can easily interface with any supported endpoint or API using the appropriate method in its module's endpoints namespace. Awesome. Now James is going to show us some of Rivet's advanced concepts.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the advanced concepts here with Rivet. The first one will be our event shortcuts. They're not available in every module yet, but you can see some of the ones that are supported right now. For now, the two most common use cases that we found were chatbots and team chat. Specifically, if you want to uh, have an incoming webhook respond to, for example, a slash command or a button click. And that's where event shortcuts come in. They allow you to perform an action as a response to that event rather than making an external API call. Next, we'll talk about the custom token store. So currently, Rivet supports a default in-memory token store. This means that the authentication and authorization is fetched when the authentication and authorization tokens are fetched from Zoom, they are stored in memory. However, for production environments, it's likely that you want to replace this with something that is a little bit more persistent, like Redis or SQL in the backend. So allowing you to modify this with the token store, you can specify where those tokens are either fetched from or stored in Rivet. And then finally, we can talk about deployment. So Rivet comes default with a Node HTTP or Node HTTPS server. However, in some instances, you may want to deploy to another environment. We also allow AWS Lambda to be effortlessly deployed by implementing the AWS Lambda receiver. However, the receiver is a TypeScript interface that you can also create your own if you would like as well. So now that we've talked about what it's like to develop without Rivet, we'll jump over to the last demo, which is where we develop with Rivet. Let's pick up where we left off our demo earlier, this time with how to build with Rivet. Since we already have our marketplace app configured from our Express app earlier, we can now use the same credentials in Rivet as well. Opening up package.json again, we can see that as well as the Express app that we were using earlier, the only other dependency that we have installed is Zoom Rivet. Information on installing Zoom Rivet can be found on our developer documentation website at developers.zoom.us, specifically by clicking on Docs, Rivet, selecting our platform, and then clicking on Getting Started. If we scroll down a little bit, this page also includes a very helpful widget that can be used to select which Zoom module you would like to use for Rivet, for example, Chatbot, as well as the code snippet that you can copy and paste to get yourself up and running even quicker. So let's flip back over to VS Code. This time we'll open up with Rivet. And if you watched our previous demo, this page may look a little different. It was intentionally left blank so that we can show how easy and how quick it is to get up and running. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we want to import our chatbot client from Rivet. Now we want to instantiate that chatbot client. For getting started options, the minimal that we need is the client ID, client secret, and the webhook secret token. And we'll also specify the port as 4000 to run on the same port that our Express app was running on earlier. Now, we'll go ahead and start our Rivet client. And to do this, we'll just use the chatbot client's start method. It is an asynchronous method, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll just console log that our server is running. Now, in between our instantiation of our chatbot client with Rivet and starting of the server, we'll go to our web event consumer, and there is a method called on/command. We'll set it to Dev Summit 2025, like we specified before in our marketplace. And then we have a callback function that can be either asynchronous or synchronous. For our purposes, we will make it asynchronous since we want to use the say command. The say command is a helper command, or a helper method rather, that will allow you to either specify just a message or a content block that you would like to send, and we pre-fill the rest of that information that we had to before, like the robot JIT, to JIT, etc. So we'll do await say, and the same message as before, hello from Dev Summit 2025. Great. So now we'll flip back over to our terminal, this time doing the same command, except we're going to do with Rivet, and then going back over to our Zoom client and re-executing the command like we did before. And we got our message. Awesome. Since we got our chatbot message up and running, I'll flip it back over to Will to close us out. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, James, for that demo. Really cool to see what you can build with Rivet so quickly. So that concludes our content for today, but we're going to open up with some time for some Q&A. So if there are any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A chat, and we will go ahead and answer them for you. Hey, John. So when you say chat, you meant team chat and not in meeting chat at this time. Yes. So with the demos, James was working with our chatbot APIs and events specifically for the team chat product. However, we do support meetings related APIs, which accomplishes in meeting chat. So really the quick answer is if you have an API or an event that accomplishes some sort of functionality available to a module we can support that I showed today on that module section or that you can access on our documentation. If one of those modules has an API, you should be able to use that with Rivet and perform that API call or event listener. So yeah, that's the short answer. Cool. Well, we'll give it a couple more minutes, and if there are any other straggling questions, we'll be here. But if not, guys, it's a real pleasure presenting this to you today. Appreciate it all. Hey Terry, thanks for that question. So, can Rivet webhooks be scoped to specific Zoom contexts? So, this isn't necessarily a question specifically for Rivet. It's more so a question related to our app marketplace, where you go and specify your app. And from there, you can select exactly what scopes belong to which events and endpoints that you want to use to minimize the access that your app has to your account. So, in short, through the app marketplace, the same way you would if you were not developing with Zoom Rivet. You can set the scopes for the events that you want to use and the endpoints, limiting the access. Yep, absolutely. And then there's a question wasn't in the Q&A, but does it pass account related information so that we can do more detailed lookups and actions? What, do you understand that? It's asking for. Yeah, absolutely. So, if I understand your question correctly, if you're using an event or an endpoint, for example, you do have access to the payload. And in that payload, depending on the API, oftentimes we tend to pass in some of that information. So, from there, say you're calling an API, it sends you like a sender ID or some sort of account ID. You can use that to then perform another Rivet API request or use a built-in acknowledgement or event shortcut to perform some sort of functionality with it. But I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to ask some more leading questions and we'll get to the meat of it. Awesome, everyone. Well, we'll hang around here for maybe 3 more minutes and then I call it at 5 till. Hey, Eric, great question. So yeah, you're exactly right. So what this tool is simply just a layer on top of our platform. So the webhooks and events, they function and behave exactly as they do if you use like just a native, Postman, for instance. Um, the difference is that we've added this layer that adds this beautiful developer experience where you can call these, methods through a method rather than setting up the code infrastructure to do so. So the event payload is the same. The fields and arguments for the endpoints are the same. It's simply just a better developer experience. And then awesome, Joel. Yeah, yeah, you'll have access to that payload. For any webhook or even the event listeners, you still have, I'm sorry, not the event listeners, the event shortcuts, you have access to that payload. So you can take a look at everything, all the fields in it, and do what you so choose. Good question. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it, Eric. Good questions, everyone. Awesome. Well, that's going to about wrap us up here in a minute. So any last questions, we'll go ahead and answer. But if not, thanks for your time and hope to see what you guys develop with Zoom Rivet. Cool, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you so much. We'll call it there.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.